Hello everybody, Valentin Todor from Elia here. On today's session, we're going to look at variables, conditional statements, and loops within a PTF test. Okay. The best way to do this is let's go ahead and dive into a test and show you how this all works. Okay. So the first one I'm going to show you are variables. It's the simplest form. And within PTF, the way you declare a variable is there's a type called variable and an action called setValue. And actually, this is the only one that has a singular action called set value to a variable. Okay, you can set variables in several ways, and the reserve character, kind of the syntax, is the ampersand, and then whatever you want to call the variable. Maybe you want to store a variable for location, so you want to say location, and then you want to say maybe a zip code 30067, for example. Okay, location zip might be a little more appropriate. Zip code. Okay, so that is how we store a variable within PTF. Okay, this is one way. There is another way that is in the people book where you can actually store it like this. Okay, those are both valid. So either you keep it in the value column or you can put it in the recognition column. And there's actually a use for both of those cases. If you're iterating values from test cases and you want to change them via the test cases, you want to keep them in the value column. But if it's something like a iteration control variable within a loop and you want to set that to 1 or 0 each time and you don't want it to be messed with as the value column, i.e. the test cases, you want to keep it in here. Okay, so they both have a use for it, but if you are doing things that is transactional data like a zip code or an account or a user, you want to keep it here in the value column and define a variable for that. Okay, and as you do things in a test, maybe you have several actions within that test, and you want to overwrite that variable, you can just set it again. Okay, so you do variable set, the same variable name, okay, and maybe for a different zip code, and then it overwrites the value that's within that variable. Okay, so that's one way to set it. And you can again set the same variable name with a different value, and then it just overwrites what's being stored within that variable container itself. Okay. Variables live only for the duration of the test playback. Okay, these are not persistent variables, which we talk about in a different video. These are local variables. When you press play, they get declared, and at the end of the test, when the test finishes and it creates the log for you, those variables disappear out of the cache. Okay, so you can use the same variable name in different tests, and it won't kind of intrinsically pass the value into the next test. Okay, unless using persistent variables, which again we'll talk about in a different video, and those behave differently and are set up differently, but we'll go through those in the future. Okay, so that's everything on variables, kind of how you can define them in the value column or how you can define them in the recognition column. Okay, so those are variables, and there's only one action that you can take on a variable, and that's set value. So you can only set values to a variable. Okay. All right, so that's variables. So let's talk about conditional statements. So conditional statements are your good old if-then statements. Okay, so the best way to do that is let's set two variables. Okay, so let's set one variable called 1. Okay, and again, just the ampersand denotes if it's that it's a variable declaration. Are we going to actually set it to 1 and 2? Okay, the actual numerical value of 1 and 2. Okay, in a conditional statement, you'll actually see in the type dropdown there is a conditional, and then you'll see that there's a if, then, an else, and then end if, right? And we always start a conditional with a conditional if. Okay, if ampersand 1 is equal to 6, then do something. Maybe all we're going to do, if that's a true statement, is log a message that something is happening. Something is happening. Okay. Of course, you want to also close out your conditional statement. So this is the minimum form of a conditional. If something, either a variable or two static numbers, usually you want to compare like a variable to a static number or a variable to a variable. If they're equal to each other, do something within the body and then close out your conditional statement. If you forget to do this conditional end at the bottom, what's going to happen when you play back, it's going to tell you, it's going to yell at you that you forgot the conditional end, right? And there's also a syntax check right here next to the save floppy drive. You see there's a syntax check. If you click on that syntax check, it will tell you that, hey, I was expecting an end if. and I did not see it because I just deleted it for example purposes. So this is the simplest form, is of conditional and if. Okay. And usually you're not just doing a message, you could be doing a message in here. Maybe as part of a condition, you're checking that something was passed or something was happened on the page that's prescribed, and you want to log a pass or a fail. So I want this to be an actual fail, and this was the wrong value. Okay. So that's one way to do it. Or within the body of a conditional statement, maybe you want to encompass a specific functionality that's within a component. Okay. Only trigger this functionality if it's this type of person. If this is this type of value, we want to use this specific region within a page and only trigger it during that point. So if I play this test back, logic test, I forgot to save it at first. If I play this test, what it's going to do, and here we're not even starting a browser, we're just using this as a shell to perform some calculations for us. Okay. It was not true. So it actually didn't trigger anything because there's no else, right? So you can see it said two variables. It started the evaluation is the variable ampersand 1 equal to 6. It's not, so end the statement. It actually didn't even trigger this because it was not part of an else, okay? So what we want to do is we want to do another conditional else, okay? The else is not required, okay? But in this case, we want to actually do an else, and I'm going to insert another one and actually formulate this how it should have been formulated, a pass, okay? Actually, it should be the reverse. This is the wrong value. If it isn't, sorry, no, that wasn't correct. Pass or fail. The value matches, okay? So the value matches here and does not match here, right? So now if we play this, there we go. Now we're triggered the else statement. The value is wrong, right? Because 1, which is holding the value of 1, does not equal 6. That's a false statement, so it triggers the else statement. If it is equal to itself or is a valid statement, because 1 does equal 1, when we play this back, we should get the green flag. Okay, there's a green flag. The values do match. Okay, and again, I'm comparing a variable to a static number here, but you can compare a variable to a variable. Okay, 1 is 1 equal to the variable 2, and if we play this, we'll see if it's either true or false. Okay, it's false, obviously, because 1 is not equal to 2, so we get the red flag. But if we set them both to the same and play it, you'll see that they work. And we get the green flag, okay? So it's just a way to use conditional statements within a PTF test. Again, you can use these, and I've used them many, many times to do comparisons. If you have a very specific, a custom business condition that you're trying to test, you would scrape something off the page, maybe some values, maybe some amounts that need to be compared against each other. And this is a perfect way to do that, right? We're using very simplistic values here, but you can, of course, do less than equal to or greater than equal to as well. If you want to do that, you can do ands and ors as well in here, different operators. We're just trying to give you guys the simplest example possible, which is just an equals of two variables. We start the conditional if, which obviously does the evaluation. We do something as part of the body, and we can have many, many lines in here that are within the conditional, right? It's not just a single line. You can have an entire process or entire region within a page that's being triggered. Else, do something else. Maybe trigger a different region in here or do something else, okay? And then end the conditional. You got to have the conditional end if at the end of your test, okay? And how you would apply this to a real test, and we can actually see here. Let's open up this fluid test, for example. Here we have a test where this is a requisition test. So what we're doing is going and creating a special requisition. And maybe we want to break something apart. Maybe this comments has to happen only certain times, or the priority flag. All of this and the entire checkout, we want to maybe trigger it in certain times. So right here, let's see, right after we click on checkout, what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert a conditional statement. So I'm going to say conditional if, and then I'm going to declare a variable called trigger underscore priority comments, okay? And when this is equal to yes, then trigger the section, okay? And obviously, you want to define this variable up at the top as well, okay? So wherever it is on top, and this isn't using any of my templates, so this is very simplistic of a test, we want to set a variable, and we want to either set it to yes or no. So it's a way to kind of control the behavior of a test. You can set multiple variables, and that dictates what happens below here and what gets triggered or not. So here, after we're done with the creating the comment, we want to do a conditional end. So where your conditional end if. So this is now a block that gets triggered on and off. It's a section of a test that whenever you say yes or no, gets either turned on or turned off. Okay. So that's one use of a conditional statement. I kind of already explained the other one, which is to check values off the page and kind of either greater than, less than, equal to each other. And then that triggers a pass or a fail flag, which of course passes or fails the entire test as a whole. So you can kind of conditional checks on the fly or segment your test into logical containers and then trigger them at the top of the test. Okay, so that's conditional statements within PTF. Right. The last topic on this video is going to be loops, and loops are very powerful. All of computer logic is built on loops, and of course, loops have a place within a PTF test. Okay, and the simplest loop of all of them, let me actually set up a variable as well. Variable set value var, and let's equal it to 1. Okay. Loops, and again, there's just a type of action called loop within PTF. The simplest one of which is a while loop, which is very similar to an if statement. Loops something while it's true. Okay, so what I can say is while var is less than or equal to 10, and then we do something within the loop. So it's very akin to the conditional. We want to do a message on the log that the current value of the var is, and then you can reference the variable itself, var. Okay. And then what we want to do is increment var each time. If you don't increment var, again, if this does require some prior experience to loops, which I won't go into, and you always have to have an end loop, just like the conditional statements where you have to end them. Here you want to end your loop, but I'm not incrementing the value. So once it triggers the loop, 1 is always going to be a static value. 1 is always going to be 1, and this will be a true statement for infinity. So when I play this back, it's actually going to get stuck in an infinite loop. And I wanted to show the infinite loop first, so you know how to stop it, because it's kind of a key. So you see here, it's just writing forever. It's just continuously writing, and it's going to write the same message over and over and over forever until you run out of memory and this thing crashes. Okay. And what you want to do, and if actually we toggle back, you'll see how it kind of performs a loop. So it's just cycling through those steps. It always starts at the while until the end. But if you want to stop it, there's a little stop button here at the top and end. It's a little dark blue a square. Press it, and it stops your loop. Okay, it's going to save the log. And obviously, the log played for a little bit, and it wrote all these lines. But it's the same value. Evaluate it. 1 is less than or equal to 10. It's a true statement. Then write this message to the log. Okay. Obviously, we want to increment var each time. So what I'm going to do is after it writes the message, I'm going to set another variable to itself, $var. So we want to set the same value that's within the variable, and we want to increment it. And there's functions, which I covered in another video, which what you want to do is you want to say add the current state of var pipe 1, because I want to increment it by 1 value each time. And you want to do this, of course, within the loop itself before the end, so that after it writes the message, it increments var to 2, to 3, to 4, to 5. Those get evaluated here at the top. 2, 3, 4, 5 is less than or equal to 10, is less than or equal to 10. And then when it reaches 11, it's going to stop. So now when I press play, you'll see that this thing is going to run, and then it stops, right? And in each of the lines, the value is 1, the value is 2, 3, 4. So it's part of the message that I'm writing to the log. It's writing that and set the, and then of course, once it evaluates the 11th iteration, it's a false statement, so it stops, okay? So this is the most simple type of a loop that you can kind of create in PTF, which is a while loop. It's got its place. There's a more complex type of loop called a do loop, which actually is an infinite loop. And within that loop, you have a conditional statement that then exits the loop. And so you can end the loop. And I'll probably do a separate video on that because that's a more complex situation where you want to have specific conditions within a loop that trigger the exit out of the loop. Okay. So there's a do loop. There's also a for next loop. That one I leverage a lot with a data mover feature where it actually iterates over a list from 1 to X or N, I'm sorry, within a loop. But I want to just showcase the simplest one of which is the loop, the while loop in this video. And actually, let's use it within a test. So let's actually go back to that same requisition test where we had that conditional statement. And instead of just here we have, the conditional that triggers the if, but maybe in this situation, I want to create multiple lines for this one requisition. Right now, this thing goes through, it traverses and does a single line in here, but maybe I want to do multiple lines in here. Well, we can easily do that. We can encapsulate the feature within this test that creates the line for the requisition, and let's make it a loop. So what I'm going to do is, I know what that is because right here is where it enters the description. I'm going to set two variables, just like we did in the example. I'm going to set a variable set value of ampersand var equal to 1, and I'm going to do a loop. Let's do the while loop again. Okay, while ampersand var is less than or equal to 10, because I want 10 lines within that requisition. And after it adds to the cart right here, so this is the add button to the cart, okay, I'm going to insert the end. And actually, remember, we got to increment it as well. So we want to do a variable set value, the current variable name. We want to do an add var pipe 1 because we want to increment it by 1. We got to close out our loop. Make sure we close out our loop. Okay, it's kind of, and the syntax, as soon as you start doing these more complex conditions in here, start using your little check to make sure that it works okay. Okay, that's from different type of errors that are happening actually above. Okay, so we've set we've set this, and also we want to use the var for the description name, because within PeopleSoft you cannot have multiple lines with the same description. That will cause an error. So we want to do is a concatenate item desker underscore pipe, and I'm just going to put the variable name as well in there. So each time it creates a line, it's going to create a description with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's going to piggyback off the variable and adds that. And you can do the same for the quantity, for the price. Obviously, we're not going to concatenate. Actually, you could concatenate maybe the last digit to be, or you can multiply this base amount times the variable and start creating lines based off that. Okay. So let's run this test and let's see this thing in action. Okay, I'm going to just turn those two off. Let's play back. And you'll see, and I'm going to just show you how it adds a couple of lines within the requisition. But this gives you a lot of power because now we can iterate and create lines within a requisition X amount of times. You can create larger loop that creates multiple requisitions based off different data points. It can cycle through lists as well within a loop. So you can have an outside loop that cycles 1,000 times to create 1,000 requisitions. Within that, you can create loops that grab different items from a specific vendor, a secondary loop within that randomly generates values or increments amounts differently. So you can mix and match loops in different flavors, but you really, of course, have to your testing requirements beforehand. Okay, so I'm running the test now. This should get us into the ePro component. It will create requisition. It should create that special requisition. And now it's going to start the actual loop. And you see item description underscore 1. That 1 is coming from that ampersand var. Okay, as soon as it fills all the fields out, it's going to click on the add button, add line, which I think is at the top. Okay, now it's going to add the next one. Again, this is within the loop we just added. You see the _2. And obviously nothing is changing here. It's actually creating lines for the same amount, but maybe that's what your test calls for, right? Most of the time when I'm doing this, I'm also iterating the quantity or the price, like exponentially increasing it or multiplying it based on the base amount, and I key off the variable. Okay, and this is going to keep going 10 times, and on the 11th iteration, it will stop, and it will continue the test onwards, where it's going to go and fill out the accounting info, uh, check out fully, submit the requisition, and give you the rec ID. Okay, and that's kind of a quick example of a loop. So we've covered variable declarations, conditional statements, and how to apply them to a test and its uses, and creating a very simple while loop within a test and how to use it within a test. So hopefully this video was useful, and we'll catch you guys next time. Thanks for watching.